When you first start a decluttering project of any kind, the first thing most of us do is grab the stuff that we know we don't want anymore, right? We chuck the trash, other stuff to the donate pile, and we're off to like a really great start, and we have really good momentum. And then that momentum starts to slow as we get into the stuff that isn't always as black and white. Those objects that make you stop for a second and you have to exert some thinking or mental energy on it. In my mind, there's 6 kinds of this clutter, and today I'm gonna break those 6 kinds down for you and give you some tips for dealing with each one. First up is the I don't want to waste it clutter. So the I don't want to waste it clutter are those items that you have a really hard time parting with because it just feels so dang wasteful to let it go, even if you don't actually really need it. I think sometimes one of the hardest parts of learning to have less is the guilt of getting rid of some of the stuff that you have. We are all pretty well aware of the landfills that are overflowing, the plastic polluting our beautiful oceans, and nobody wants to continue to contribute to that problem. So we have some item that we don't actually need, but the idea of throwing it away not just seems wasteful, but also feels immoral. So how do you deal with this clutter? First, try to rehome it. If it's perfectly good, you can try selling it, or personally, I like giving things away for free or donating them because it tends to be a lot quicker. I don't have to spend as much time thinking about it, which means I'm probably not gonna procrastinate getting it out of my house. Saying we're going to sell something, but then actually taking this time to list it and sell it are 2 different things. Now, even with your best efforts, there's still gonna be some I don't wanna waste this stuff in your home because, well, no one else wants it. So you now have 2 choices here. You can either keep it out of fear of guilt of adding to the world's landfill, and it will now remain your job to maintain, store, and inventory this. Or you can throw it away and take it as an important lesson for next time you want to buy something. For me, the process of getting rid of a lot of my stuff, of having to face some of the crap in my home that I owned that I didn't want or need and have to throw it away, made me a lot more conscious of what I buy, because I don't want to have more things that I'm just going to have to add to the trash. Sometimes that process of sort of like admitting the guilt and throwing it away is going to really be more beneficial in helping you for future purchases, as opposed to just keeping it. You won't really have to face that guilt quite as much, and so you may be more likely to continue to add to the clutter. Next type of clutter is aspirational clutter. Aspirational clutter is the clutter you hold on to for a future version of yourself. For clothes that you'll wear when you lose the weight, for craft supplies that you use when you're not so busy, for equipment for a hobby that sounds really great, but you can't quite commit to. So how do you deal with this clutter? Well, you kind of have to have a heart-to-heart with yourself. Will you truly be using these items in the near future? If it's clothes for when you lose the weight, are you actively trying to lose weight? If it's something for when you're not so busy, is your schedule going to be different in 6 months? Or are you going to be just as busy? I think that we all have real versions of ourselves and the aspirational versions of ourselves. And I think it's good to have aspirations for ourselves, but depending on the season of life we're in, we can't always get to the full aspirational version of ourselves. And that doesn't mean that we're failing, it just means that we're prioritizing. For example, my aspirational self has a garden, I read daily, I cook everything from scratch, I paint in my free time. Real me has 2 kids, 3 and under, a full-time business, and a home to care for. I can't be that full aspirational version of myself at this season of my life. I have to choose which one's realistic for me. I would love to have a little easel with paint set up for daily art, but it's not realistic in my life right now, and so it's not worth having that stuff that I know that I won't use. Not to mention, as I've talked about before, your stuff talks to you. And if you're keeping things for an aspirational version of yourself that you can't realistically find time for right now, it's going to be always there reminding you that you're failing at that. Number 3 is incompleted clutter. I'm sure that we've all got some untended items in our home right now. I can see from where I'm standing, there's a box with a dress that I bought that I need to try on and decide if I want to keep or return. And then I have a little box right here of some furniture anchors that I need to anchor the furniture for our kids. These are 2 things that need to be done, but until they are done, they are just taking up space and adding to my clutter. Life is busy. There is always going to be something that needs to be done, but you can be proactive in making a plan to get things done. Don't let these things sit around indefinitely. Okay, so let's make this happen for one of these incompleted projects. I have had this box of like latch locks to like childproof a cabinet sitting in our kitchen pretty much since it was renovated, because there is a cabinet that I want to childproof. Okay, so I have made a plan for today. It's gonna happen, so this box doesn't need to live here anymore. Do you wanna know the best part about this? Is it literally took me about 10 minutes to install these, and they had been sitting there forever. Lots of times we see it and we're just like, we don't have time to do it. But you usually find that if you just set aside a little bit of time, you can usually get to these items that you have been avoiding, these incomplete items that are just adding extra clutter, and you can check them off your list, and it feels so great when they are finally done. So it's really about knowing that it's there and then not just letting it stay there indefinitely, making an active plan to complete it. Another note to consider is considering having an in-progress storage bin somewhere in your home, especially if you're someone who likes to craft or do little projects. Instead of leaving this stuff sprawled out on the table so that you come to it every time you work, is you can easily pop it away into a storage bin and store it in the closet or on a shelf when not in use. Even if you're using it and you know you're gonna come back to it first thing in the morning, the extra 5 minutes that it takes to sort of just put it away will go miles to keeping your space feeling more clutter-free. Next up is the I just might need it clutter. The I just might need it clutter. I think this is my favorite one. I have an entire video on this one, which I will link below, but I love it because you can literally apply it to everything. You can say, I just might need it to literally any slightly useful item. But basically you gotta learn to be more selective, or you'll simply keep everything that is slightly useful. Try asking the following questions about this item. 1, what's the worst thing that could happen if I don't have this item? 2, do I have actual plans to use this in the next 60 days? 3, is this something I could borrow or rent, or do I actually need to physically own it? And 4, could I make do with something else? Okay, so here's an example. These are a pair of shoes I bought for my daughter, and they fit her, but they were just like too hard to get on, so she only wore them a couple of times. It's hard to kind of part with them because like part of me is like, maybe I keep them. What if we have another kid? But like, what if we don't? What if it's not a girl? Like, what if, you know, then I also have to like store it and manage it until the time that we have other kids, where I could take these, I could donate them. Somebody else in need could use them. Next up is sentimental clutter. Okay, sentimental clutter is pretty self-explanatory. This is the stuff that you're keeping because there is an emotion connected to it, things like your kid's artwork or a memento from a trip. And there's not really any practical value to these things, but they remind you of something from the past. I'm not against keeping some sentimental stuff. Maybe I'm just a sap. Now, while I understand that it's just stuff, some stuff is connected to emotion. And in my opinion, that's okay. When it's not okay is when it's causing too much clutter. I have a little ledge on the windowsill that is in our stairwell, and I place rocks when my son gives them to me. Yeah, it's just rocks. There's no value to them, but they make me smile when I come down the stairs in the morning. I'm not against some sentimental clutter when it's not impacting the flow of your home. But when it is, it needs to be addressed. If there is a way to par down and then store away your sentimental clutter because it's in your space, then do that. Get a big bin, label it, stash it away, the most important things. And if there's some items where you can allow yourself to hold on to the memory and detach for the item, that's good too. Not every single sentimental item is worth keeping. So understand that letting go of an item doesn't mean that you are letting go of the memory that's associated with it. Last up is gifted and inherited clutter. This can sort of mash with sentimental items. These are about things that have been passed down to you from family members, things inherited from those who have passed, or gifts from family and friends. These items can be hard to part with because we don't want to disrespect anyone, either our family or the gift giver. It's likely you have something tucked away in your drawer simply because getting rid of it would be, well, awkward. If it's a family item and you don't want it anymore, you could ask other members of your family if they want it. And if they don't want it, does it need to be you that's housing it? Can you keep it digitally? Can it be remade into something else? Could you photograph it and keep the photo, which is much smaller? If an item is gifted, many of us hold on to it thinking the giver may expect to see it in our home, but in reality, it's often not expected. And even if it is, that expectation isn't fair on you. A gift was given to you and should be yours to do what you want with it. So if you want to give it away to avoid cluttering up your space, then that should be your right. And most gift givers wouldn't want you to keep something that's causing you extra work or stress. So there you have it, my friends. Those are the 6 kinds of clutter that I think that we often find as roadblocks when we are decluttering, and some little tips and tricks to help you sort of work through them as you come to them. I think sometimes when we are decluttering, we just think about like organizing things into like the keep, throw away, and donate pile, but there's so much more involved in that, from emotion to practicality to things that we are going to use at some point. As always, thank you so much for stopping by and watching this video. I hope you are having a fantastic day. Remember to be kind to yourself and to others, and I will see you all in my next video.